Congressman Wolf, you've been very outspoken on the Chinese government's record on human rights, including their complicity in the genocide taking place in the Darfur region of Sudan. You've also advocated putting even more pressure on the Chinese government through the Olympics that are going to take place in China this summer, including a possible boycott. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, there are people talking about putting pressure on China with regard to the Olympics. I do not favor a boycott of the Olympics with regard to the athletes. The athletes have trained for years, and it's their opportunity to participate. I do believe that heads of government should not attend the opening ceremony because China is using their Olympics this year the same way that Nazi Germany, that Adolf Hitler used the 1936 Berlin Olympics. As you may or may not know, the whole idea of the Olympic torch came about through the 1936 Berlin Olympics as a result of Adolf Hitler. And Hitler wanted the West to come and see, and the world to come and see his country. And I think for leaders to go at that opening ceremony would almost be like a leader to go to the 1936 Olympics when Hitler was doing the terrible things against the Jewish population and doing other things. So there are a group that have urged that political leaders in the West not attend the Olympics, that they boycott the opening ceremony. Because as you know, China is now persecuting the Catholic Church. They have about 35 bishops under house arrest or in prison. They have a large number of Protestant pastors. We now see the news they have plundered Tibet. I was in Tibet a number of years ago. It was against the law to have a picture of the Dalai Lama. China is spying against us. They're selling weapons to countries that are a direct threat to us, threat to our military. Many people believe that it would be a mistake for leaders in the West to attend the opening ceremony. So you're not talking about boycotting the Olympics. Athletes would participate, but you are talking about having political leaders not attending the opening ceremonies.
How do you think we should approach China in terms of, because of their human rights record, what's the best way to sort of push positive reform in that country?
Well, there's a lot of ways, and unfortunately the Bush administration or the Congress isn't really doing any of them. China is doing all the bad things that I said. I think we have to put pressure on the Chinese government. They're also selling us, Thomas toys with lead paint. We now have the report of that drug that is used in heart medicine to be polluted, if you will, or to be having chemicals in that can do harm. But there's no freedom of the press. They're arresting people who are using the internet for democracy. So I think America and the West has to stand up to China, and we have to get them to really be more effective insofar as and more responsive with regard to human rights and religious freedom. But we very seldom hear Western countries speaking out. The human rights conditions in China are worse today than they were yesterday, and worse this year than they were last year, and worse now than they were 10 years ago. So people said when China was opening up that you would have all this change. Well, it's all been for the worse. There's been no improvement on human rights and religious freedom. That actually slipped back. During the Reagan administration years, whenever the Secretary of Commerce or Secretary of State went to Moscow, they would meet with the dissidents. They would invite the dissidents into the American embassy. Many times they would actually go to the dissidents' homes. And I think that that's the model should be. The next president should have our embassies to be islands of freedom where we speak out and advocate for, similar to what we did in the 80s behind the Soviet Union, and also have more programs. We have Radio Free Europe and things like that, more programs working with the dissidents to change their government. The Chinese people are good people. I mean, many will come through my office when they come over here. They're really very, very good people. It's the government. It's the same way behind the Iron Curtain in Romania. The Romanians were wonderful people. It was the Ceausescu government that was evil, that was doing all these bad things. So I think there should be a greater emphasis on human rights and religious freedom and advocating and meeting with and speaking out on behalf of those who are being persecuted.